the Moravian church band at Nain, Labrador. It is 200 years since the first Inuit men were taught to play these instruments by German and English missionaries who came here to preach the gospel. A band like this stood on the wharf at Okak, a village 90 miles north of here, in the fall of 1918, and played to greet the arrival of the mission ship, the Harmony. Within a few days of the Harmony's departure, the people began to fall sick and die. They had been infected by Spanish influenza. After the disease had run its course, Okak was nearly wiped out. The records of the Moravian missionaries and the recollections of the survivors tell the story of the last days of Okak.
I was a very young man when I first arrived in Labrador. Sent there from Germany by the Moravian brethren to work at the store in Okak. When I saw the village from the deck of the Harmony, I remember wondering if I could survive a winter in this barren, isolated place. But I took strength from the knowledge that generations of Moravians had worked here among the native people for nearly 150 years, and I was determined I wasn't going to disappoint them. My work in the store kept me very busy. We traded such things as tea, molasses, and flour for the goods produced by the people, salted cod, salmon, and char, and many different types of fur. When the people were industrious and fortunate in the fish and fur, they provided well for their families. And, I might add, the mission profited too. Eventually, I got to know everyone in the village, and I came to respect the native people for their skills and their practicality, and most of all for their acceptance of conditions that I thought were extraordinary. Over the years, I saw a lot of hardship, but the events of November 1918 were the greatest test of the human spirit I ever experienced. That year, the last year of the Great War, we heard rumors of an influenza sickness, but we had no idea how serious it was. If only we had known, we could have kept the Harmony away and protected our people from the infection carried by the crew members. For whenever she arrived in port, there was tremendous excitement. As soon as the ship was anchored, everyone in the village would rush on board. You must understand, the ship would only visit perhaps twice a year to bring us supplies for our store and to take away all the fish and fur produced by our people during the previous season. It was like a holiday after 8 or 9 months of solitude. How ironic that the thing we looked forward to so much brought us such terrible death and suffering.
It's in the fall, what they call the last boat. And I remember when she come in, and they said that there was sickness aboard of her, and no one allowed aboard. I remember that, but they landed freight on the dock, but I don't know if they got the sickness from the freight or whether someone went aboard. They think someone went aboard. And then, about 3 days after, I remember they was saying that they were all beginning to get sick. So my father and mother got sick too. And I think it was all right if he didn't go. But if he went outdoors, that was it. So he went down to the store to get some food for my mother because she was really sick. And he really got sick himself. And I remember him lying there on the floor on a mattress. And he was so unconscious, you could move around, he didn't know it. Then my mother died, and they took us children. There were 3 of us. There was my sister Rosie, myself and my brother, baby brother, Alec, name was. Took us out the house and carried us down to our grandmother.
That's all I can remember about. When I call out about my mother, when I called out to her, there was no answer. So I went over to her bed and put my hands on her, trying to wake her up. My hands popped back just like I felt something I wasn't expecting to see. Hard body. And my brother was feeding off her. And I went to my stepfather and told him my mother died. He didn't take a bit of notice to me. He just went off to sleep like, they had no pain or nothing. I can remember they had a jar to get their breath. Bad cold, choked right up, seemed like. It come on all at once. My mother was only sick a couple of days, and she died, and my father.
Now my grandmother had a good house, warm house, and they put all the children that their parents were dying in that house to keep them together and try to look after them, eh? And they were bringing in children all the time because the parents were dying. And I remember a woman one morning come in, she said she was cold, she had a blanket wrapped around her. And she asked could she sit by the stove and warm herself. She lay down by the stove, a wood stove in them days, and she died there. Just like that. And there was another man come in to cut up wood for my aunts. I had two aunties living then, Eleanor and they were a posse. And this man cut up wood, come in and brought in the wood, and he put it down there, just lay down by the stove to warm up, he said, and he was feeling sick. He lay there and died there. And they had to call someone to take those people out, see? That's how they were.
The harmony had been gone only 5 days, and the sickness claimed 8 lives. Almost all the people in our little community felt sick, and the misery in the houses was horrible. They were too weak to help themselves, to fetch water or prepare food. We distributed soup and firewood from our store. Fortunately, the plague had spared the mission house and left us to care for the native people. As the people died, we moved their bodies into one house, trying to keep the corpses secured against the dogs. Later, we had to give up trying to carry the bodies to just 1 or 2 houses, and instead, those of us left alive congregated in a couple of houses that were cleared of corpses. By this time, the dead outnumbered the living. After the disease struck Okak, nobody had given a thought to the dogs, and they were crazed with hunger. They were running wild around the village, breaking through the windows of the houses and feeding off the corpses. We had to burn many of the houses to destroy the mangled human remains and other filth. Eventually, we had to stop everything else and arm ourselves and 2 young boys to shoot the dogs. In all, we killed about 100.
But that's what they did, see? They took the bodies and put them into what they call would be a strong house where the dogs couldn't get in. Then they had to start killing up the dogs because they was getting at the dead bodies. So I remember they gave every boy that was able to hold a gun out to kill dogs. And they was killing dogs everywhere. And they was right wicked, because they was hungry. And no one looking after them. I can remember me and my cousin, this Sippel Inuitsman she is, went out to try to bring us someone cut up wood for us outdoors and tried to send us out to bring it in. We couldn't get out there, dogs after us. So we come in, got a gun, and I shot one. Shot one of the dogs, then the other one ran away, see? I can remember that. Then they took all the dogs out on the harbour, started dragging them out to see what they had killed and around and pull them up in the harbour. I think they burned them. I wasn't sure, but I think I heard them saying they burned them.
The old dogs was the worst. They were so hungry, they used to break in the houses, eat the bodies. And one fella told me that he was trying to haul out a dog he shot from under the bed, driving the dogs out of the house. When he had that hooked out with a stick or something, all that time, that was his sister's head. He thought it was a dog. No wonder he was crying, couldn't stand it hardly when he was telling us, you know.
With all the sickness and death, we hadn't thought of the fate of all the people who had left Okak in the fall for the seal hunting camps. The people always assembled for the Harmony's arrival, and then would go seal hunting until Christmas. We wondered what had become of those in Silutalik, Magfortikal, and Kikatakswak. We decided to go to the camps as soon as the ice conditions were safe. But before we were ready to leave, a few survivors began trickling in. We learned that they too had been stricken by the disease.
When the ice had formed and it was hard enough for travel, we decided to try and make it to Okak by dog team. There were 3 teenagers and 4 of us women, along with 3 little ones. There were no tracks or trace of any other people anywhere. We moved on, always watching for some other sign of life, but there was nothing. When we came into sight of Okak, it was just getting dark. We noticed there were not too many homes lit up, not even the hospital. When we got closer, we noticed that one room in the hospital was lit up, and so were the homes of the minister and the storekeeper. All the other homes looked empty. We were left thinking that the rest of the people had died in the sickness.
We knew from the people who had returned to Okak from the camps that most of them had died. So we set out to the camps to bury the bodies, kill the dogs, and collect any food that might be left. At Silutalik, although 36 people had died, only 18 remained to be buried. All that was left of the others was a few bare skulls and shank bones. When we arrived at Uliosuk, we found 2 dogs running around outside a shack. The door was open, and the place was half full of snow. We heard a sound, and thinking it was a dog, got ready to shoot it. It was hard to see inside the shack, but there we found a little girl, still alive, and all alone with the bodies of her family. Miraculously, she had survived for 5 weeks by herself.
There
was one dog that looked after me. All around me, dogs were fighting, but this one dog kept the others away from me. He was our lead dog. All the other dogs came from the camping places near ours. After the people died, there was no one left to feed the dogs. They were all shot when the minister and the storekeeper came. After several days, the missionaries returned to Okak. There was a big box on the back of the komatik sled and someone was inside it. I thought there had been an accident. I thought someone had been shot when they were killing dogs. When they told me it was my niece Martha and that she was still alive, I fainted with fright. My little cousin lived for quite a while. I don't know how many days. I think I starved him to death because I didn't know how to feed him. He would say, "Titu, Titu," because he wanted tea. I was holding him in my lap one evening, and then I laid him by my side. As soon as I laid him down, the dogs attacked him. They tore him to pieces, but I think he was still alive. This is one thing that haunts me, even to this day. I didn't know how to feed him because I was just a child myself.
On December 8th, we began to dig a large grave in which to bury the bodies. This was no easy matter, as the ground was frozen to a great depth. At 3 feet, we came to the old frost, and we had to make large fires, using a great quantity of petroleum. In this way, we dug down to 7 or 8 feet. It took us a full week to dig the grave. It wasn't until early January that we began to haul the corpses from the houses. All the bodies were wrapped up in calico. We laid them in the grave and said a prayer. The grave was closed and a small monument erected. I remember it was a bitter cold and stormy day. Nobody wanted to stay in Okak after the flu. With the help of people from the other villages, every available dog team was used to resettle the remnants of families to new homes. Okak was abandoned in the summer of 1919.
Although the village is long gone, people still come to Okak Bay. This camp at Siluktalik is busy every summer when families from Nain come north to fish for salmon and char. During the fishing season, the people sometimes visit the site of the village where so many of their relatives died. Everyone has heard the stories about Okak. Now there are only ruins. The only living reminder of the settlement is the rhubarb patch. The hardiest plant in the missionaries' garden still thrives, just as it did when people lived here. In 1918, the flu claimed 357 victims, 1/3 of the Labrador Inuit population. It is not surprising that Okak survivors were anxious to leave the scene of so much sadness. Even the missionaries had lost heart.
I often think about my years in Labrador and all those people, my friends who died. I remember one of the missionaries saying that after the epidemic, it scarcely ever happened that one of the people spoke to him about matters of the heart. He said it seemed the people had lost faith, and you know, I couldn't blame them. My own faith was shaken during those dark days of the sickness. I remember his exact words. He said, "When I try to reach them, I have the impression I'm knocking at a door that is closed."